Karim is a photographer, filmmaker, and whale guide based between Iceland and Hawaii. Karim co founded Kogia, a nonprofit media library and fellowship program devoted to protecting marine life through storytelling. Raised in the Middle East and Asia, Karim's curiosity for hidden worlds beneath the sea, within wild places, and even beyond Earth continues to guide his work. His images and films, published by National Geographic and BBC Earth, focused on endangered animals and fragile ecosystems, reminding us what is at stake. In 2021, Karim was chosen for Dear Moon, the first civilian mission to orbit the moon aboard SpaceX Starship. Though the mission was later canceled, he holds on to that dream of telling the Earth's story from the stars. Please enjoy my time with Karim. Hey, y'all. Let's go there. Karim, I'm so excited we finally made this work. You are all over the planet, and so it's miraculous that you're giving us this much time, and I'm super grateful for it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And I thought, like all of our shows, that we would start with how we met and how we know one another. And you and I met in Czech Republic.
Yeah, that was a fascinating trip with Yemi and his moonshot program, moonshot camp. Do you want me to talk about that a little bit, or you want
Yeah,
to
I'd
talk
love to
about
get
it?
your perspective on it. We haven't really talked about it in post much, so I'd love to get your perspective on it once you've digested it.
I often think about how little things in life just keep opening up more pathways um, and leading to new things. And I think about like how did I end up at Moonshot, and that was through being invited by Yemi, who me and Yemi, as you know, were part of the Dear Moon crew together, where we were selected amongst 1 million people to go in a Starship rocket around the moon. And so, even though that project got canceled, the result of meeting the other crew members and the people around that has cascaded into so many other things. And so, I went to the Moonshot camp, and that's where we met. And it was just exciting to meet all of these young people that are doing such fascinating things, to make the world a better place. Met someone else, Shane, there, and through Shane, we have been working together and did a fellowship program in Wales, where me and my nonprofit we went out and did a workshop and taught 10 young people how to make films, how to do photography, how to tell stories, funded by the UK and Welsh government through Shane. And so, yeah, now we have this fellowship program going on, trying to plant the seeds of new filmmakers and expand that around the world. So it is interesting thinking about like, well, what are the connections between people, and what did that lead to? And you never know; it might be something that happens right away, or it could be 10 years down the line. And I always find that fascinating. So I'm excited to see what goes on from the people that we meet and what we're doing now and meeting each other.
Yeah, I agree with you. I spent the last few years saying yes to everything, and it's taken me in the most wild and unexpected directions. And it brings me much joy to hear that you and Shane. I didn't realize Shane was part of that fellowship, and it brings me much joy to hear that that came out of that. And the gift of you came out of that for me. And I'm going to go on one of your trips, which I'm super nervous and excited about, which we'll get
Yes.
to in just a bit. So yes. Now I want to talk a little bit about who you are in the world, Kareem. Because if I were to describe you, and I want to hear your version, if I would to just were to describe you, I would say an intrepid, worldly man who specializes in volcanoes and whales and nature photography and filmmaking, who's moving through this world in his own unique way and giving back through his nonprofit.
That is a very nice way to describe what I do. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. How would you describe it? What did I miss or what did I get maybe slightly off?
I don't think you missed anything. I mean, a lot of it comes from my upbringing. I was born in the UK and then moved throughout the world, through the Middle East and Asia. every 2 to 4 years, we'd move to another country, and so I learned to look at the world in a way where from different perspectives and different viewpoints, and realize that like there isn't one way of living or doing things that is the correct way, and that people have various cultures and traditions and ways of life, and that we are on such a diverse planet. And so I've taken that, combined with the knowledge of adapting to new locations, and brought that into my work and my personal life. And so it's meant that when I see something that is interesting, I'll often let myself get distracted by it, and pursue that, and see what comes out of it. And just kind of, I feel very lucky to have been raised with this idea that I can do anything if I put my mind to it, at least within the limitations of, physics and ability and things like that. But that, just if I have an idea, why not have the audacity to go for it if the opportunity is there? And that's something like, running a nonprofit. I have had no skills in running a nonprofit. Absolutely not qualified to do any of that. But I was looking for something to do more with my photography work, rather than just showing pictures of whales and fish and saying like, look how nice these are. You should save them. But like, what's the next step? How can I take that and give the tools into the hands of people who are doing great conservation work? Like, how can I use photography and filmmaking and my skill set to amplify the voices of others? So that's been very exciting aspect of my life. And yeah, I'm living in Iceland, which gives me a nice combination of being out in nature and in the elements, but also interesting people to work with and projects that are going on.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us a little bit more about your nonprofit, Cream, because I think it's brilliant in this digital age what you discovered, and how you're actually making a difference with your own platform and with the help of your community. And now it's expanding. So tell us the name of your nonprofit and tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Okay. The nonprofit is called Kogia, which is a type of pygmy sperm whale that is rarely ever seen. Um, Almost no, I think one person I know of in the world has been in the water with one. So they're incredibly rare, but they're also in the ocean. It's almost like this mythical animal. And essentially, what the nonprofit is, we focus on nature conservation and science communication. A lot of scientists and nonprofits and conservationists are doing incredible work, but they are not very good at uh, communicating the work that they do, telling their stories and sharing that. Um, I realized that I have all of these photos and videos sitting on hard drives, not doing anything. And there are all of these nonprofits and activists and conservationists that need media, that need photos and videos to show their work and tell their stories. And so I partnered up with my cousin, and we built this library where small conservation efforts, people on the front line of conservation, can use ocean media for free. So it's a quick application. They can use it for fundraising or education. There's activist groups that are working with anti-whaling. There's student education groups in Southeast Asia. There's scientists using it for research papers, and then there's groups using the library for fundraising. So there's all of these uses. It's expanded. We've got something like 20 contributors in the library now, and organizations in more than 55 countries that are using it. So that's exciting. That's one component of it, is the library. Another component is this fellowship program, where we did our pilot program in Wales. We gave camera gear to 10 young people. We gave them mentorship and a workshop and storytelling, and they went out into the world to tell conservation nature stories. They will get to keep the camera gear, and we'll be checking in with them and helping them throughout, um, so that we can, kind of plant new seeds for filmmakers. The idea is to expand this onto a global program, so that instead of having to send people from the UK over to Mongolia to tell their story, people around the world can be telling their own stories from Ghana, from Egypt, from Mongolia, from Japan, everywhere. Um, and so the idea is like to help facilitate young storytellers that want to tell their own stories from their own communities. And then we also we have we make films. We have a little studio where we make nature conservation films, and then we also help other nonprofits and scientists with their science and conservation communication. So it's kind of a side project that has been taking up more time and energy, and has been very exciting because it just means that I can do more with my work and also bring other photographers and filmmakers into the fold, build this network that allows us to work in nature conservation in an area that needs a lot more time and energy and attention than it currently gets.
It's quite beautiful. And I love the idea of having somebody that's local and proximate actually telling their own story. What's the typical age of these young people of the 10 that you have today?
So the in our pilot program, the ages were between 18 to 25. As we expand to a global program, we want to increase that age range so that it starts younger, so that we can start with people who are 14, 15. Obviously, for logistical and legal reasons, it's just much easier to do things with 18-year-olds because it a lot they're usually in university or working a job, and they have more flexibility than someone who might have to be pulled out of school and can't um, you know move around. But it's the start of the program, but there's been a lot of excitement. It was fantastic seeing, a lot of these people had never even used the camera before, and now they're out there making conservation films and telling stories and interviewing scientists and editing and doing all of these pieces. And I think that can change the trajectory of their life. And it also means that, you know, nonprofits and people doing conservation work in that area, instead of saying like we need a filmmaker, we have to go search for someone from a far distant land, that they now also are connected with these local storytellers. And so that's part of the idea too, people telling their stories, but also for those organizations that are doing good work, that they can work with someone local.
Yeah, and driving awareness around conservation for this younger generation as well,
Yep.
which is also tremendous. Okay. All right. So that's Kogia. Now I want to talk also about your other work that you do because you're also a filmmaker, a photographer, and then you also do trips. And if I'm not mistaken, you've done films for Netflix and others, Nat Geo. Tell us a little bit about that aspect of your life.
Yeah, so I am a photographer and filmmaker primarily, and I focus on nature and wildlife and natural phenomena. Though I also love to photograph daily life of people all around the world, and various things like outdoor sports and activities where people are skiing or surfing or kayaking. But my main focus is to document the lives of things like Arctic foxes or humpback whales, volcanoes and northern lights. And as I was doing photography and learning new things, I've always followed whatever it is that excites me and interests me. So, if I see that there's some lizard that hunts moths in the garden at my parents' house, then I would spend a lot of time every morning going out and trying to, like, in the best light, trying to figure out and capture this and figure out, how do I get close to these lizards, how do I get into their world to show their perspective, so it's not just a human looking down at another animal, but I want the viewer to feel like they are inside the world of that creature, whether it's something impressive and incredible like a blue whale mother and calf, or whether it's just a little bug that no one ever pays any attention to or thinks about. And I found often the most fascinating things are the things that are in our backyards that we don't pay as much attention to because it just seems normal, right? Like gulls. People, when they see seagulls, they often don't mind any attention because they're like, it's just a seagull. But when you actually look into the lives of these animals and you start playing with lighting and different times of day and see how they interact with each other, it becomes quite fascinating. And so I try it with my work. I try and bring people into that world so they can see how beautiful this planet is and start to appreciate. And if you protect the humpback whale, then you also protect all those little creatures around it. And so I would always just show the work that I personally photographed and filmed, not because someone hired me to do, but because it's something that interested me, and I would go out and spend time and do it. And from that, sometimes I license photos and videos to different publications for nature documentaries to Netflix or the BBC. And then I've also worked a little bit. Most recently, I worked on the Oceans series, Our Oceans from Netflix, filming drone footage of orcas going up onto the beach and grabbing elephant seal pups and then bringing them in, teaching their young how to basically beach themselves and practice this method that is passed down from one of the female orcas that has taught her whole family. So there's so many fascinating things in the natural world, and I try and spend as much time as I can showing that and sharing that with people because it is full of surprises.
Well, I have to say, Kareem, it's interesting to hear you talk about your photography in this way because the thing that impacts me the most about your photos, and by the way, I get so much joy when you're on a hike and you send me a photo of a fox or you send me a picture of where you are, whether it's fresh honey in Hawaii. But the thing that I think I said to you early on is, wow, you are really connecting with these animals. The fox is looking at you or the humpback whale is looking at you. I can see the connection. You're actually they're making eye contact. And it's so profound and it makes your photography, in my opinion, super unique. It for me induces a lot of emotion.
Thank you. That's so good to hear.
Yeah, it's really profound. Okay, so some of the work that you do, I imagine has to be considered dangerous by some. So I imagine shooting volcanoes in the way in which you do, or being in nature in the way in which you are, can put you at risk at times. Is that true, or am I just perceiving that?
There are definitely some moments that are sketchy. I mean, volcanoes are inherently dangerous, as we know. You can safely be around volcanoes. Sometimes it depends on like if you're sitting upwind of the volcano, if you have altitude to retreat to, if you're on a hillside, you it can be perfectly fine and safe. But of course, then there are moments where it's not ideal. Same thing if you're in the water with tuna or striped marlin. Like you could get speared by a striped marlin that is trying to hunt a fish, and then your organs are spilling out, and little fish would be eating it. And I sometimes visualize possible scenarios that could be really bad. But I also think about how dangerous it is to be in on the freeway in Los Angeles. And to me, that is more scary as a whole than being out in nature. Especially, nature isn't out to get you. It's more just this powerful force that you could end up in a bad situation if you. But mostly, it's a matter of being prepared, for weather, for conditions, being adaptable, being with a buddy, so that you're, safe, and then also just being mindful around animals. Like of course there are bad luck scenarios, but with a whale, for example, like if you are being respectful and gentle with a whale, they will do the same. There is a level of like how dangerous do you want to get and how much do you want to push the limits, and for me, I try not to push the limits too much. Of course there are scenarios where the volcano can draw you in and it's the glowing molten rock that you feel like a bug and you just start gravitating towards it, and then your instinct kicks back in and you realize I should probably not be this close because if a new fissure opens up, then I could be surrounded by lava, or have it open up near me or under me. You just never know. But having as much preparation and awareness and information and knowledge as possible is very important.
Yeah. Well, you come across to me as someone who's extraordinarily thoughtful, and so I have full trust in you to go on one of these trips, but I'm curious, has there ever been a moment, Karim, where you've been frightened or you felt like, oh, this could go wrong?
Um, I mean, there's been quick flashes of moments where around volcanoes, for example, where I've thought like this might not be the best place to be in. I was at a volcano in Hawaii and on the edge of a cliff, and lava was pouring into the ocean. And I had told myself that I would go for 5 minutes and look at it and then go back, and hours went by because it was just so mesmerizing. So there's an awareness and a weighing up of risks in any kind of scenario. But I think oftentimes more dangerous scenarios are things we're not really thinking of or not as aware of. I never grew up really in a place that I was constantly thinking about snakes. And so snakes are just not on my radar. I don't think about them. And so, there are times where I might be in Kenya and I'll be walking through the brush, with shorts on, not even considering, or somewhere like Colorado, right? Where, if I'm in the mountains, I might not be thinking about snakes. And so those are scenarios where I always try and go with people. If I am not knowledgeable about the situation, to go with people who are. So, like, polar bears are not my specialty. I do not wander around in Svalbard by myself. I go with people who understand them very well. Something like humpback whales, they are my specialty. I've gotten to know their behavior and how to read them. And so, those kinds of scenarios I feel very, very comfortable in. And, working with a good crew, good captain, another guide, so that, if something goes wrong, you're able to deal with the situation. But I think in general, like being in nature, unless you're mountaineering or doing extreme activities like, wingsuit sky base jumping, it's not any more dangerous. I don't know about the statistics, but it doesn't feel any more dangerous than being in a big city where there's cars and traffic and, there might be, human conflict. For me personally, I think being prepared, I always carry like I always have a headlamp with me and like a Garmin in. I mean, even right now, I've got my Garmin InReach where like satellite thing, and I've got a headlamp, and it's summertime, and I'm in the city in Iceland. I don't need it now, but what it means is I have this bag, I have like a pack, so that I never forget it because it's always with me. So that if I do spontaneously go on a hike and the weather goes bad, I've got the equipment with me to
Yeah.
for the basics.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that snakes aren't on your radar because I wouldn't have understood this until recently. We went to Kauai for the first time, and I didn't realize that Hawaii doesn't have snakes. And it's so
Yeah.
shocking given how lush and tropical it was. At one point, I was on a hike and I was a little nervous because there was a lot of like debris and leaves, and I thought, "Ooh, I don't want my feet going through this." And I was worried about a snake because having grown up in Texas, we're trained to fear snakes, and we even train our dogs to smell snakes to protect them. For those of us that
Wow.
are hikers, so it's interesting to hear you say that. What about Kareem? Any stories that you have around some of the moments that you carry with you that were either the most beautiful or had you in awe or the most significant? And I know you've probably had many, but are there any stories that really stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean there are many, and it can be really simple things, right? It doesn't always have to be this like, crazy moment where, a whale is doing something amazing. I mean, there are times where I'm, in a field of flowers and it's golden light and I'm in nature and I just think like how beautiful this planet is. So but of course then there are also those moments like watching volcanoes erupt is one that it never disappoints, and it is always unique in every moment because you're watching geology that normally takes place for hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years for landscapes to change. When you're at a volcano, you're watching it change within seconds, and you're watching the landscape grow. And you can just be sitting there and feeling the heat and watch molten rock just fly into the air and slowly come down and tumble down the side of a mountain. There was the first volcano I ever saw is called Volcan de Fuego in Guatemala. And every 20 minutes or so, you have this violent eruption and an explosion, and lava just flies into the air and tumbles down the mountain. And some of these chunks of lava look like they might be the size of vehicles, and they just roll down, and then the glow slowly goes away, and you've got the stars in the background. So there's these really impressive moments. I also got to see the northern lights above a volcano, and it was just me and
Whoa.
my friend there. There was nobody else, and the lights were dancing and swirling around the volcano. And you just don't even know how to take pictures of it. There's no way to actually try and convey it in a photo. And so there are times where I don't even take photos because I'm looking at it, and there by the time I would try and get the photo ready, it would be done. I've been in northern lights that are so bright that you can read a book from the light of them, and it looks like the sky has just opened up into another dimension, and that like the gods are up there. Like you're looking into a whole different spirit realm. Um, Also, I had a moment where there was humpback whale milk, and it was just floating and swirling, and I had never seen humpback whale milk. It was just fascinating. So I dove down and I was filming it, and then the calf started coming up, and seeing that juxtaposition. Um, yeah, and watching whales fight is also very, very impressive. I mean, you hear the sounds of them crashing into each other, and the bubbles, and they fly around you. Um, and hanging out with the fox, an Arctic fox, and it just deciding it feels comfortable enough to have a nap, go to sleep. I was with one Arctic fox in Svalbard, where me and my friend were there. And, in the beginning, we were waiting for hours and hours. There was a reindeer that had died, and so the carcass was there, and we knew that this fox was visiting because it takes some days for the fox to eat it or for the carcass to be eaten. And so we were, just laying down like silently, quietly waiting for it. And after some hours, the fox came, and it got so comfortable with us that over the course of a few hours, by the time we left, we were actually just standing having a conversation at full volume next to the carcass and looking at the fox and looking at the thing and not even worrying about it. And you have this animal that feels comfortable around you. So there's so many moments of awe and wonder, that it really is hard to capture them all. And I mean, many times I see things, as I said, that I don't even have a photo of because it happens so fast, right? Like watching a lizard just jump off of a flower and grab a moth and stuff it into its mouth, and then it's done. And you're like, well, did that really just happen?
That's amazing. I love seeing the world through your eyes, Kareem. Okay, so I'm wondering, we haven't talked about this, but how does the way in which you experience the world impact you spiritually? And is spiritual the right word? Are you even a spiritual person?
I mean, I think spirituality is different for different people. I haven't reflected too deeply on what that means for me. I know that when I go out into nature and I'm, hiking and I'm seeing beautiful places and I'm looking at glacier and northern lights above the glacier, or, hike up a mountain and ski down it, or, free dive under the waves and seeing, it looks like storm clouds going over and turtles are eating, and there's this sense of peace and chaos all at once. Um, for me, rather than trying to define what that is, I just feel those feelings, and then I start to think about like how incredible it is that this existence is here, that we get to be a part of it, that we're in this moment of time, and also just reflecting on my own fortunes of where I'm at in the world, because so many people throughout history and so many animals and so much life has just struggled and had it really tough. And so that also gets me thinking about like, okay, what is my purpose here then, and what can I do to give back? Like, how do I, um, you know, not waste this opportunity and time that I've been given in a way where I can do justice to myself and appreciate it and enjoy it and explore it, but also share that with other people. And so, I try and do that with my photography. I always wonder, like, what more can I do? And so, I guess in that sense, I don't know if that's spirituality or not, but just thinking about my place in the world, and how we live in a world where there are things like clouds and rainbows and fire and electricity, and what does that mean that we as humans we've harvested and harnessed those things, but that it often comes at the expense of all the other life on this planet and at the expense of each other. Like, how do we treat each other? And is this something that is just like inherent human nature, that we are, these violent animals that will just pillage from each other? Or is there something else to us where we can actually turn around the way that we've been living and be better stewards of this planet, and try and, do more justice to what is all around us and treat each other better? So I get a lot of these thoughts while I'm out in nature, and it can be hopeless, but then also thoughts that are hopeful because there is so much potential. But again, I think also if we all just try and do our best and be good to each other within the means that we have, which is not, everybody doesn't have the same ability and means, but if for people who do have the ability, if they can put more towards giving back to each other and to the planet, then I think we'd be better off.
Yeah, super fascinating. You're touching on something that actually was a conversation I was having last week. So I was with 21 leaders, and we were talking about what makes a good society. And we were talking about the tensions between community and individuality, and the tensions between liberty and equality. And,
Mm,
it is in our country in particular, in the United States, democracy has thrived on rugged individualism and liberty. And but at one point have we lost our way and realized that we're all part of one global community.
right.
And so what you're saying really resonates with me personally. I hope it's the next era for us as a human race and as a planet. Um, okay, Kareem, who gave you your first camera? Or how did you get your first camera into your hands? And how old were you?
So the first time, I mean, I had tried, cameras just tiny little bit. My parents had a little point and shoot, but it took only a few photos. It wasn't very good. But the first like proper encounter with photography, my friend Michael Choi, who is Korean, came to visit me when I was living in Abu Dhabi. And in Korea, they were far ahead technologically than the rest of the world. And so he had this amazing little 4 megapixel Casio Exilum camera. And when he came to visit me for about a week, I pretty much just used it and didn't let him use his camera. I think his parents
Wow.
had gotten it for him as a gift, to use, on his trip to Abu Dhabi to visit me. And so after he left, I needed to get one, and I had a little bit of money saved up from, allowance over the years, and so I bought a camera and I started taking pictures with that, and then that just kind of evolved. I started learning, you know, what things worked and what things didn't work, and then bit by bit, got a bigger camera that I could take close up photos, of bugs with, or wider photos or low light photos that you could try to take pictures of the stars. And then that just evolved into, photographing underwater and flying drones and, doing various extreme situations and scenarios in the world.
Wow. And so how old were you when that happened?
13.
Wow, so they changed your life in a way.
Yep.
Are you self-taught, or how did you go about educating yourself?
Yeah, just trying things and seeing what worked, and then um, looking up on the internet and reading, different techniques and seeing how does somebody do this. There was a website called Flickr
Yeah.
that photographers used, and so I would sometimes message people and say like, "How do you do this thing?" So it was a slow process, teaching myself, but it also meant that I wasn't bound by these technical rules that people are supposed to do. And I wasn't bogged down by the specs of like, oh, you shouldn't use more than ISO 200, or when you do this, you have to use these settings. So, you know, I made a lot of mistakes, but it means that now I don't follow the technical rules that one is theoretically supposed to use. So there was an advantage in that, but I
Yeah.
can also see the advantage in being formally taught. You maybe learn a bit quicker.
So that explains a lot, Kareem. For me, that explains why your photographs are so unique, and induce so much emotion. I have a story. I don't, people don't really know this about me. When I was little, like second
Hmm.
grade, so probably 7 or 8 years old, my elementary school art teacher told my mother, "Don't ever let her take an art class."
Wow.
And
Nasty.
well, it was actually positive. Listen to this. She said they will change her art.
Oh, I see.
And so
Okay.
apparently had a really unique way of drawing. I drew with a single line. I wouldn't pick up the pencil. And she said they will teach her a different way. Don't ever let her take an art class. And so
Okay.
I didn't ultimately become an artist, but I still have kind of this inner creative. But it, it's similar to the advice that
Yeah.
I think it would have been the advice she would have given you too. So in a way,
Yeah, that's nice. I thought it was because she was saying you were so abysmally bad at art that it
no,
was totally
no,
hopeless.
I was going about it differently, and she didn't want anybody to disturb it.
That's so good. Yeah, I mean, sometimes the advice you get is like good practical advice, but not good in the long run. I was always told that I should focus and specialize on one thing, and I didn't want to focus and specialize on one thing. I wanted to photograph insects and fashion and sports and nature, and so I didn't do those things that are good business decisions. I didn't post photos of the weddings that I were or the portraiture that I was doing, which would have got me more wedding work or more portraiture work. Instead, I posted photos of birds and animals, which meant a much slower process of making a career out of that. The advantage is that because I started so young, I didn't need to make money as a professional photographer at 15. When I was in university, I was, I didn't, I wasn't my whole focus. And then when I finished university, I lived in Cambodia. So I really didn't need to make a lot of money. I just needed to make enough money to eat food in Cambodia. And I didn't have all of the subscriptions and phone bills and things like that, insurance that we have now. And so that was an advantage that really allowed me to push into the direction that I want to do. Now, of course, I wouldn't, if somebody was working a job and had a family and kids, I wouldn't give the same advice and say like, yeah, just follow your passion and photograph everything and don't worry about the business aspect. That obviously wouldn't work. So it's situationally dependent, like where you are at in life, how much you have to go for the practical thing and how much you have the freedom to explore and build a style and change things and do something more niche and unique.
Yeah. Although I will say there's so much to be said about the exploration. I personally am so triggered when I see parents trying to enforce a certain path on their young adult children. And they're trying to kind of tick all the boxes of all the things that you should be doing, do your internship by this age and
Right.
work for these firms. It just makes me crazy.
Yeah.
Uh, so I feel like it's so wonderful that that you had the upbringing that you had. I want to understand what made you who you are today. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't go back to what you said earlier. You were moving every 2 to 2.5 years,
Yeah. 2 to 4 years.
2 to 4 years. Okay.
Yeah.
And what was that? I mean, I can assume what that was like for you as a kid, but what was that like for you as a kid? And how did that inform the family dynamic?
Yeah, I liked it. My parents were very good at about having us always move at the year end, so it never disrupted our school year. My mother was a teacher, so she knew how problematic that was if you left, partway through the year. Because we had started doing it from a very young age, from birth, essentially, it meant that like that was what we knew and that was life. It wasn't a scenario where we spent 15 years in one place and then all of a sudden moved to a country on the other side of the world. It just meant that I made a lot of friends, learned how to make friends quickly, learned how to adapt to different situations and food and culture and navigate my way around. And so I always enjoyed it. I liked the experience of going somewhere new. Of course, you miss aspects of and people from the places you went, but we do live in a quite a globalized world, so you can keep in touch with people in a way that wouldn't have worked in the 1300s.
Yeah, and then what informed this for your parents? Was this just the sort of childhood they wanted to provide for you, or was this something that was out of necessity with their work?
It's just opportunity and work and money. And my father had a job in the UK, so they were there. And then he got a job in Turkey, and so then they moved there. And because my mother's a teacher, anywhere where they're building, he's my father was a bridge engineer, so anywhere where they were building a bridge, there was also a school. So it was very easy for my mother to get a job at whatever school was in the area. And building a bridge only lasted 2 to 4 years. And so then it was like, okay, where's the next project? And then we would move to the next country. But it did open up also the ability to, when we were in Abu Dhabi, then we could explore Oman and Jordan and Egypt and those places around that, because the scale of where you are in a place like Korea or Abu Dhabi or India, like you can then go and explore that local area. And the timing worked out quite well. My mother had the same holidays that me and my brother did. And when my father had holiday, then he would also join. And so we could go do things like mountain biking and hiking and see the world around us. And so that made for a very vibrant childhood.
Wow. Do you have any significant formative moments that you can think of that really shaped you as a human being? Or any places in particular that really made an impression on you?
I mean, India is a very formative place, regardless of what age you go to India at. It's just a place where you feel like you've seen everything in the world in a day, because there's so much vibrant culture and people and so many different ways of doing things and different religions and different lifestyles. Um, so that was very formative. It was also a place where I realized how much of what your life situation is purely luck. It's based off of what situation you're born into, what class you're born into, how much opportunity you have. I met people in India who were so incredibly talented, that but like the reality of their life is that they weren't going to have the opportunities that someone in Norway might have, simply because of the family situation and where they're born. I also realized that religion is really just a thing of like, where are you born? Like if you are born in Saudi Arabia, you're not going to be a Christian. If you're born in you know the countryside of Georgia in the United States, you're not going to be a Muslim. And so like it's just a matter of like your upbringing for most aspects of life. you know sure, what you do with it and how much hard work you put into. And we have this American story that people tell where anyone can be anyone, but for most of the world, the reality is it's all about your luck and the lot that you're handed in life. And so that was a scenario that made me very humble, even as a kid, and realize that like the merits that I achieve in life, I'm not going to pat myself on the back and say like, "Wow, what a good job! Aren't I amazing?" I'm going to look at it from a perspective of like, I've been very lucky to have the opportunity to be able to make something of this and to do these things, um, and to then also appreciate all the people around me and the work that they do. And when you go, places like Korea and Japan, there's so much honor in the work that people do, not based off of how important that job is perceived by society, right? Like in the West, it's often like you're more important because you're a lawyer or a banker or a doctor, and this person is not important because they're a garbage person. Whereas in other parts of the world, it's how much energy and effort and honor you put into it, that you can be just as honorable in any job as, a trash collector or a toilet cleaner as, the president or the prime minister. And I think that's a really useful lesson, and thing that I learned as a kid and try and take with me in life is that, like, nobody is better than someone else because of their position or their wealth or their job.
I could not agree more. I always say, thank God our titles are not going to be on our tombstones. And that we all bleed the same way, or so we think, you know? I would agree. The thing that for me was so remarkable about Japan, aside the fact that I saw so much beauty in it, was the intentionality of everything. And India in particular made a very profound impact on me. We took our children at the ages of 10 and 13 when we were
Hmm.
traveling the world without devices, and I've never been so simultaneously overly stimulated and yet called back to a place simultaneously. Like I was overwhelmed by it and also couldn't wait to go back and get more of it. It was
Yeah.
uh it was just it's profound. It's hard to describe.
It's like cranking the volume to full on every form of stimulation, like all of the food and the sounds and the colors. Yeah.
Yes, on all absolutely, on all of it. Okay. All right, so bring us up to current date from a personal perspective. So Kareem, you're married
Yes.
and you live all over the globe. Tell us a little bit about what your life looks like.
Well, I'm, yeah, based in Iceland. My wife is Icelandic, and so I've set up base here. But then I spend about half the year in other places. My family's in Hawaii, so I get to go there and visit them when the dark winters arrive here in Iceland, and then work on different projects and around the world. And I kind of always just try and keep myself open to different opportunities. And I love working on different types of projects with people. So I don't want to just put myself into one box of this is all I do. And so yeah, I'd like to dabble with many different things, and try and spend as much time outside as possible when the weather is good. But also have a social life that lets me see people and have dinner with friends, things like that. But yeah, essentially, I'm based in Iceland, which is a good gateway between Europe and North America.
Does your wife stay in Iceland or does she travel with you as well?
Sometimes she joins me on travels. She runs a fertilizer composting startup where essentially Iceland is a desert land. For about 40% of the soil is eroded, due to sheep eating the little shrubs, and then Arctic winds blow the topsoil off. So she's working on restoring the soil in Iceland, as well as building better composting systems for rural communities, using a fermentation method to make this, organic fertilizer, that really just brings life back into the land and makes it nicer for everybody to do home compost.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. All right. And is that unique to Iceland or is she offering her products everywhere around the globe?
She's starting in Iceland. Iceland is some of the more complicated degraded soil. And so it's a system where if it works in Iceland, it works everywhere. So she's starting in Iceland and then expanding out to Europe and then, hopefully globally. But she is in the fundraising phase, which I think is a whole other skill set, and unique thing that, is its own journey.
Yeah, yes. Especially right now, but I wish her a ton of luck. We need more people like her and you in the world.
Thank
Well,
you.
Kareem, what speaking of, what is your wish for the world? What is the your hope for the world right now?
I mean, that's a big one, right? There's a lot going on. I've been listening to this history podcast recently and different empires, and so that can also make things seem more hopeful. That you're like, okay, we are living in a time that is maybe not so bad. At the same time, we are using an incredible amount of resources very quickly, and not really prioritizing the planet, which we are on a train moving at high speed headed off a cliff. And I think what has happened is that we've put that burden, companies have put that burden on the regular person. Like, oh, what's your carbon footprint, right? Which was invented by an oil company, or recycling, invented by the plastics bottling company industry. So I think what I'm realizing is not to put the blame on the regular person. Unfortunately, the responsibility has come onto the regular person, but like working towards how do we change the bigger systems. My hope for the world is that, you know, politicians and companies and people start to really put a bit more time and energy into protecting this planet, because at the end it also becomes a human issue, right? Like if we don't, just purely from a selfish human perspective, if we don't care about the planet, a lot of people are going to suffer, and it's going to make our societies less fun to live in, for everybody. um, so yeah, I mean, I think on some hand it's like small steps, people working in their own communities. On the other hand, it's also large things. We need countries to step up. We need companies to step up, politicians, um, you know, to do the right thing. But I think that's the whole overwhelming task that can't be, distilled down to one little thing. But I hope we can all, I guess I hope we can all just try, and if everybody does a little bit better and pressures those in power to do a lot better, then I think that we can have a better planet that is more vibrant for everybody to live on, like people, animals, plants.
But the thing that gave me hope too, and I don't know if you observed the same, was the the way the planet began it to heal itself during COVID.
Mm,
We're all kind of sent back to our rooms and homes and apartments. And so it gave me hope that we can heal this planet. It's just going to, as you're mentioning, require systemic change and ideally a global vision. Okay, so I don't want to let you go before we talk about your amazing trips.
yes.
Tell us about the trips that you do and a little bit what they're like. And I want you to tell our audience where they can sign up if they're interested.
Okay. Well, I run ocean safaris around the world. Primarily, the main thing that I do is trips to take people to swim with humpback whales in the South Pacific. And it's one of my favorite things to do in the world, maybe my favorite thing to do. You have, these animals, humpback whales, that are gigantic. And they are comfortable. If you move slowly and respectfully, then oftentimes the mothers will even let their calves come up to you. And so you have these scenarios where you have like humpback whales that will swim around you or under you, come to play with you. And it's this fantastic, life changing scenario that really can quickly connect people up with the ocean. In any other scenario, you can't get out of the safari car in Kenya or Tanzania and look at the animals and hang out with them. But in the water, you get out of the safari boat, and then you've got these whales in front of you, and they all have different personalities and different moods, and curiosities, and they're very intelligent. You can, if they're singing, you can feel their song vibrating and shaking through your body, and you can feel it in your organs and your bones. And this feeling of having uh, a whale just come right up to you face to face and look at you and wonder what you are, and watching them play. It's some of the most, beautiful, adorable things, seeing the mother and the calf interacting and the different dynamics. And, it brings grown people to tears. Yeah, you never know what you're going to see out there. So I run these trips. It's, 1 week long trip, 5 days on the water, where we organize all of the food and the accommodation and the logistics. And then we go out every day on a boat for, 6 hours, 7 hours or so, and look for humpback whales. And we see which ones we can, if we can get in the water with them. Yeah, it's wonderful. It's in French Polynesia. And different, next year we'll also be in Tonga. And my company is called Dance with Whales. So if people, it's just snorkeling. There's no scuba diving or any license or anything like that. You just need to be fit enough to swim in the ocean with a snorkel mask and fins. And then we also run trips, to swim with sperm whales or mobula rays, um, striped marlin, sea lions in places like Mexico and Dominica. But yeah, it's very exciting. I love it. It's always good to be out in the water and on a boat and connect with nature. And I'm very glad that you're going to be joining, and I hope that other people can come too.
Yeah, I'm so excited. And I have a feeling this is going to be, I mean, it might be too soon to call it, but I have a feeling this is going to be an annual tradition for me that I'm going to start following you around the globe.
You
Okay.
are welcome.
Okay. I'm so excited. Okay. So, Kareem, what else can people do if they want to learn more about your nonprofit and support your nonprofit work? Where should they go? And then also, if they just want to learn more about your work in general.
Yeah. To see my photography work, I am on the internet. It's just my name, Karim Iliya, which is Karimiliya. I'm sure they'll be able to see it in the title. I can send you some links as well. So I have Instagram. That's the place where I post frequently. I have a website where people can see a more curated, see like my favorite work, watch some videos. And then my nonprofit is called Kogia, and that's just kogia.org. And, we have a library of photos and videos. If people want to get involved and support us, either financially, if they're able to, or, if they have some kind of skill that they want to, be a part of and join us, then that's always exciting to have people join us in that area. And yeah, that's about it.
Well, that's great. Well, I would love to continue to support you and Kogi and all your endeavors, Kareem. I want to say thank you so much and express my gratitude for you sharing your story with all of us and your work with all of us. And I find the way you live your life tremendously inspiring.
Thank you. That's wonderful to hear you say.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Yeah, it's possible to love your work and do tremendous good in the process, so long as you listen to your heart. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kareem.
Thank y'all for listening today. If you're so inclined, please follow, subscribe, download, share, all of the things so that we can keep going. We appreciate your support so much. If you're interested in learning more, go to thecoeffect.co.